Welcome back. So in our previous video, we started rendering some dummy content to the screen here in our React application. In this video, we're actually going to start creating our menu. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and start by closing my window here. I have my terminal open, so I'm going to close that as well. I'm going to come into my circular menu folder, and in part 1, you might notice a subfolder called Node Modules. I'm going to go ahead and control-click that and move that to the trash before duplicating part 1. All right, great. I'm going to control-click and hit duplicate. And we're going to call this part 2. Great. I'm going to open that in Visual Studio Code. And I'm immediately going to direct my attention into the source folder into app.js. Now, what do we want to do in here? Well, we want to start by taking out our dummy content. And the next thing I'm going to do is give this container div a more fitting name. I'm going to call this page container instead of just simply app. Now in here, what do we want to do? We want to make another sub div for our circular menu. So I'm going to give this a class name of circular menu. All right. And in here, we want to do a couple things. First, we want to just a individual div for the icon of the menu icon itself. So I'm just going to give this a class name of menu button. And down here, we want to do things a little bit different. We want to render all of our menu items individually using a JavaScript method called map. So before we do that, I'm just going to crack open Safari, and I'm going to go over to Google, and we want to Google something called lists and keys in React. There you see, list and keys React, and I'm going to come to this first link here, lists and keys -React. Great. And as you can see below, we can use the array map method to return a new array of JSX elements, which will then be rendered to our screen. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to set up some curly braces in here. And in here, I'm going to go ahead and paste a series of arrays. Don't worry about copying this down yourself. I have included all of these subarrays in the link below in the description for this video. And I actually noticed I just made a teeny mistake. We want to wrap all of our subarrays inside of one big array so that we can map over them. I'm going to hit tab, and now we can just define the map method on our main array here. So we can pass in a callback function, and we want to implicitly return something, so I'm going to use the parentheses instead of the curly braces. For each subarray inside of our main array, we just want to return a div. I'm going to go ahead and close that. And on this div, there are a few attributes we want to define. It's important when you're mapping over JSX elements in React to use a unique key prop. So I'm just going to use the key prop, getting some things from our callback function. First, we have an array. We can go ahead and destructure the page as well as the color. I'm also going to hit comma, and we want the individual index for our subarray inside of our main array that we're mapping over. So the key is going to be just the name of the page. I noticed that I didn't properly close my div down here, so let's do that. If you want to learn more about this key attribute for React JSX elements, I would suggest you go back over to Safari and scroll down until you see a section labeled keys on the page we previously explored. With that mentioned, I'm going to go back over to Visual Studio Code, and I'm going to resume adding some attributes to my div here. The next thing I want to add is a class name, and we want to call this div menu item. I think that is a good name. Next up, I want to give the div a style attribute. We want to pass in an object, and in here we want to do a couple things. First up, I want to define a background color, and we're just going to use the color we destructured off of our array above in our callback function. Color, comma, and we also want to give this a transform, And in here, we want to do a couple things. I'm going to use a template string. We want to rotate our div, and we want to translate it as well, okay? Now inside of our rotate function, I'm just going to inject a simple formula. What we want to say is 360 degrees, and divide that by, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 pages divided by 8, and we want to multiply that by the index we get from our callback function. The other thing I want to do is tack in the letters DEG, stands for degrees, after our formula that we pass into our template string. I also noticed that I have an extra space before my rotate function. I'm going to get rid of that. Next up, I'm going to focus on my translate function. This is going to be really simple. We just want to translate 175%. With that out of the way, I'm going to go ahead and go up here and say File, Save. I'm going to minimize my Visual Studio Code window, and I'm going to go ahead and quit Safari. The next thing I want to do is crack open my terminal, and from here we want to type in CD followed by a space. I want to come into my circular menu folder, and I'm just going to go ahead and paste part 2 into my terminal. I'm going to hit enter, and now what we want to do is say npm install Node.js at 4.14.1. There are currently some issues with version 5. I'm going to go ahead and install, and this is what we're going to use to add some styles to our React application. Alright, I will see you once this is finished installing. It might take a bit. Alright, that is now done installing. I'm going to go ahead and close my terminal. I'm going to close my circular menu folder, and I'm going to come back over to Visual Studio Code. I'm going to start by cleaning up my directory structure a little bit. In here, in the source folder, I'm going to come up here to this new folder icon, and I'm going to make a new folder inside of the source folder. I'm going to call this components. And in here, I'm just going to drag and drop the app.js component, moving it successfully. Now, inside of index.js, we are importing our app component. This path is no longer correct. What we want to stay instead is /components/app. I'm going to go ahead and save that. And inside of source, I'm going to create another new folder. I'm going to call this styles, and this is the folder that's going to house all of our Sass files for our application. To start, I'm going to come over here into our styles folder, and I'm going to make another new file. I'm going to call this main.scss. And in here, what do we want to do? We want to define a style for our page container class. And on here, we want to define some new styles. First up, I want to give this a display of flex. And we also want to say align items center so that our menu is centered on the screen. We also want to give this a height of 100% of the viewport height, so 100 VH. We want to say justify content center, so the page container is centered horizontally and vertically. And we also want to say a width of 100 VWs, VW, which stands for viewport width. I'm going to save that. And I am going to indent our styles here so that they just take up 2 spaces instead of 1 tab. Perfect. Next up, I want to create another new folder inside of my styles folder. I'm going to come over here, make a new folder. I'm going to call this partials. And in here, we want to make another new file. I'm going to call this underscore circular menu.scss. And in here, we're going to define some styles for our circular menu. So first off, I'm going to say circular menu. You are going to have a height of 144 pixels, you are going to have a position relative, and you are going to have a height of 144 pixels. I'm going to go ahead and make this 2 spaces instead of 1 tab just to keep our styles consistent. And next up, we want to define some styles for our menu button and menu item classes. So menu item, and in here we want to say left 0, top of 0, and a position of absolute. And remember, they're going to move relative to their circular menu parent since this has a position relative. All right. I'm going to indent this so it's consistent with the style above. There we go. Oh, I actually noticed there is a typo up here. I have a duplicate height property on my circular menu class. We want this to be width instead. So width of 144 pixels. Save that. Next up, I want to style my menu button class. And on here, for now, we can give it a background color of black. We can give it a border radius of 50%, so it's nice and round. We can give it a height of 100% of its parent and a width of 100% of its parent as well. All right, go ahead and save. Indent this so it's consistent with the rest of my classes. Perfect. And the last thing we want to do is style our menu item class, so menu item, and on here we want a border radius of 50%, so it's nice and round as well. We want a height of 100%, just like the class above, and we want a width of 100%, just like the class above. Great. Again, go ahead and indent that so it's consistent with the rest of our styles so our linter does not complain. Great. The next thing I want to do is come back into my main.scss file, and we're just going to import our partial. So we want to say above, at import, defining a string, and in here we want to go into our partials folder and just define our circular menu.scss file, semicolon at the end of that. Now we are almost done, I promise. One of the last things we want to do is come into our index.js file, and I'm just going to import main.css. I'm going to say import.styles/main.scss. Save that. Just to be sure, I'm going to say, can't save all because we've saved everything, so that's just fine. With that, we should see something in our browser. I'm going to go ahead and close Visual Studio Code. I am going to close my Finder because I had it open. I'm going to go over to my terminal. I'm going to type in cd, and I'm going to open my circular menu folder. Now in here, all I want to do is drag part 2 into the terminal, hit enter, and if we have the node modules inside of our part 2 folder, which we do, we should be able to run npm start. Go ahead and let that start up. Should just take a minute here. And you can see we have a great start to our menu. We have a nice looking design here. We have our rotated menu items and the main menu icon in the center. All right, I think that's a good place to stop for this video. I will see you in the next part. Stay tuned.